Is one of our first sessions where we are going to be having some guest speakers sharing some knowledge that has come back specifically from the membership forum. But before we begin, I want to take a minute to just look around where you are and recognize the traditional lands and waterways in which you are living on or working or get to enjoy on a regular basis, whether that is the Lekwungen speaking people of the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations, or the Sinchothan speaking people of the Malahat and Wasanik nations, or if you're on the mainland, potentially maybe you're neighboring the Musqueam, Squamish, or Tsleil-Waututh. And if I have missed one of the traditional lands or waterways that you're on, then you can feel free to mention that in the chat, and also just take a brief minute to just enjoy and appreciate the culture and history that we get to steward on a regular basis. So thank you. So with that, we will move forward and do some introductions today. So today's OneAbility membership forum is focused on grant writing and a bit of fundraising. And so we have two lovely guests with us, Stacy and Mel. And so I'll just do a little bit of an introduction. So Mel has, for over 20 years, has been helping locally, provincially, and internationally with non-for-profits to raise funds to create positive impacts in their community. She is a non-for-profit consultant and has worked with her clients to raise over $3.5 million through grant funding, and while striving to empower them to be self-sufficient grant writers. Mel enjoys spending time with her active family, a proud dog mom to a 9-month-old COVID puppy. That must be a lot, Mel. So anyways, we're very happy to have you here today. And we also have with us one of our long-term members from OneAbility, who is one of the founders of OneAbility and has helped steward our funding and grants within OneAbility and also at Pisces. So we have Stacy, who's the business development manager at Pisces, and her role is responsible for fund development, overseeing fundraising, including major gifts, annual gifts, corporate donations, and private foundation support. And since Pisces became a charitable organization in 2017, the organization has received a significant support from grants, including a $475,000 capital grant that supported the accessibility enhancements at Pisces, which we can all be really proud of because many of us have gone and enjoyed the space. She's excited to talk to you today about her experience in grant writing and lend you some helpful tips. So thank you both for being here today. And what we will do now is just welcome everyone, as Andrea likes to say, do a little bit of a Zoom room introduction. So if you can just, we're going to go around and how we do it, I'm with Power to Be. How we do it at Power to Be is typically you share your name. We have a little bit of a question with the theme today being around grant writing and fundraising. I would like you to share your name and the organization you work with. And then if there's any thoughts or intentions you have when you're trying to learn a little bit more about fundraising and grant writing, what comes to mind for you so that we can all hear where people are at. Because one of the benefits of the OneAbility Collective is also recognizing how we could collectively write grants together and how we can also support each other's fundraising goals. So partnerships is a really big asset to many funders. And the more we can uncover a little bit of the synergies between our organizations, the more we can make that larger collective impact. So with that in mind, share your name, what organization you're from, and if you have any grant or fundraising ideas that come to mind for you that you're hoping to achieve today. And I will throw it over to Brian to start us off, and then Brian, you get to pick the next person.
Okay, so I'm Brian Gray, and my program is called Play Beyond Expectations, with a focus on helping people with disabilities make life better. And from the standpoint of grant funding, I feel I don't have a clue and need all the help I can get. One board member that helped us get a couple of grants has had to step away because of other commitments. So yeah, I really need this session today. Thank you. And let's go with Annie. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy. I'm not specialized as coordinator of operations. I'm non-for-profit organization. And I'm hoping to learn some of craft skills reading agree because I agree as one of my coworkers is involved with the craft is a first species application. So I'm hoping to cannot learn it pass up to her.
Thank you, Annie.
And I'm passing to coding.
Awesome.
Thanks, Annie. I'm Carolyn. I'm from Power to Be. And in terms of grants, I'm fairly new. I'd love to learn the basics, but I'm actually kind of curious about the trends and what the trends are pre-COVID, and then also during COVID, of where the grants are kind of popping up, and if there's anything we can learn from those trends. And I hope my internet's working. I apologize. I might have to turn my video off because it's been a little spotty.
You're working.
But I will pass it over. Okay, great. I will pass it over to Paul.
Hi there. My name is Paul. I represent Power Canada. In terms of grant writing, I think for us, we've done a couple grants. I think trying to find how do you balance storytelling for the athletes, their stories, without sort of exploiting their stories. So kind of looking like a plea for pity in a sense. So how do you balance storytelling appropriately for that? I'll send her to Jade.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jade Werger. I'm with Sportability BC. My experience with grant writing, I guess, kind of goes back to my schooling days with my master's degree, and I kind of wish I knew more about grant writing then that I know now. I learned a lot after, which probably would have been more helpful in school with me. But with that, and then working just with nonprofits with Pacific Sport prior to working with Sportability. But yeah, I'm interested in learning just different strategies and things like that, different goals. Like Paul said, or sorry, like Carolyn said, different trends. I believe that was Carolyn that said that. So yeah, I'm just open to learning and hearing other people's strategies to hopefully further our success with funding. I'll pass it over to Lisa.
Thanks, Jade. My name is Lisa Myers, and I work for BC Wheelchair Sports Association. I was originally a program coordinator, and then I relocated to Ontario, but stayed on contract as a program consultant and as a grant manager. So I've been writing grants for the organization since 2017. And so for me today, I'm interested around researching grants and finding those new grants, because I feel pretty confident in the ones that are available for our organization and kind of those staple grants that we always apply into, but would be interested to hear of how people are researching those new grant opportunities and trying to engage those new organizations that maybe don't really know what you're doing for that first kind of storytelling aspect, like Paul was saying. I will pass it over to Kimberly. And I'm sorry, I'm going to turn off my camera because it's lunchtime in Ontario, so I've been eating, so I don't want you guys to watch me eat my lunch.
No problem.
Hi, I'm Kimberly. I'm from Adapt Island up here in Nanaimo. And Mel has connected me in with this one because she couldn't be here, but also because I have experience with grant writing in the past, but trying to get some new trends, what's out there. And I like what Paul said about looking at how do we connect stories with applications. And I think we're just hoping that we can have the skills to help others who are trying to find grants and when they envision having a new inclusive outdoor space. So just trying to up the skills so that we can be more help to others. And I'm going to pass it over to Taylor.
Hello. I'm so sorry. I had a call that went late and I just joined, so I don't know what we're doing right now.
It's all good. Hi, Taylor. Nice to see you. We're just hearing an intro of your name, what organization you work with, and the theme for today is around grant writing and fundraising. So if you have any questions or ideas that come to mind of what you're hoping to get out of today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karina. All right, yeah, so my name is Taylor and I go by the pronouns she, her, hers. And I work for Canucks Autism Network as a training coordinator. And I myself, I've been working in the position for 1.5 years and I came from government. So I know very little about grant writing, but eventually post-COVID, one of the things that we would love to do on the training team is apply for some grants for organizations or companies that don't have enough money to pay us for us to deliver training, so we can kind of put that pool of money that they can apply for. So I just, I'm a newbie and I'm open to learning anything about grant writing.
Thank you. Now, Taylor, we were going to ask you to pick somebody but you don't know who's gone yet. So I'm going to pick someone on your behalf, and we'll go with Alex. And Alex, if your mic's not working, you're welcome to, put something in the chat. If you guys can read that, that's great. Thank you, Alex. Awesome. Welcome. And then why don't we go to Alana?
Hi everyone, my name is Alana and I work with Move Adapted Fitness, and I have been thrown into a role of grant writing with no prior experience for the last 3 years, and so I've learned a lot in those 3 years. But I think for us, I think it was Carolyn, maybe someone said this, I feel confident in the grants that we apply for, that we have in the past 3 years and kind of where we've had success. So for me, it's finding funding through, avenues that we haven't explored yet. Where do I find that? In particular, we're looking at more like capital project funding. And so we have some, we would like to make our space a little bit more accessible, and in doing that, some renovations and things like that need to happen. And so, where can we look to for funding for something like that specifically? Yeah.
Awesome.
And oh my God, I've been paying attention, but now I don't know who's gone yet. I feel like, is everyone gone?
Lisa or Kim, I think, are left.
Okay, let's go with Kim.
Oh wait, Kim went.
Oh, did she?
I haven't gone. I'm not sure if you want me to go or not.
Went. Yeah, Kim. And Kim has also posted in the chat, her mic is not working as well. Awesome. Thank you, Kim. And so then that brings us over to Lisa. Nope, you already went as well. I
did.
Back to me. So I don't think I've missed anyone.
Do you want me to go?
Zach.
Thank you.
Hey, my name's Zach Zitek. I work with OneAbility as the website specialist, and I also do all of the social media and the newsletters for OneAbility. I'm completely new to grant writing, so anything I can learn will be amazing. Yeah, that's me. Thanks.
Thanks, Zach. I'm Karina, and I'm with Power to Be, and have a little bit of experience with grant writing, but I would say I echo a lot of the themes today that have been spoken. But the one that fascinates me is kind of how do we get out of that isolated solo one organization perspective and really start leveraging how we can collectively write grants together so that we can continue to do the great work that we're doing, but really share a bit more of those resources. Awesome. So does anyone have any final thoughts or questions before we push it over to Mel, who will start facilitating? Okay. Over to you, Mel.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Karina, and thanks everybody. It was great to get a perspective of where everyone's coming from. And you took care of some of the pool questions that I was going to ask, so this is awesome. So as Karina had mentioned, I've been fundraising for over 20 years, and it's been quite a journey. And like a lot of you, I was kind of thrown into it at the start and just sink or swim. So thankfully, I think I've been swimming. And throughout this journey, I've had the opportunity to branch off and specialize in, grant writing specifically, and research, which I'm kind of a research geek, I'll admit. And about 13 years ago is when I decided to branch off on my own and become an independent consultant. So I was going to ask you, where your organization was based, but it sounds like everyone is pretty much in BC. So I don't even need to ask that question, so I can just move on to my presentation. So I'm going to, I'm assuming I have the ability to share my screen now. So I am going to launch my slide deck, and because I'm using a Mac, it is not as straightforward, so I'm absolutely sharing the wrong screen. So hold on one second, sorry. Let me just see something here. Sorry, you guys, this was totally working for me before.
Oh, it's all good.
Okay, I can't even find it. What the heck? Sorry.
Yeah, sometimes you can scroll down to see a few options.
I know, this is terrible here. Okay, here we go. Let me see here. There we go. Can you guys see it or no? Not yet?
We can see it, but can you make it more of a full screen?
I can. How's that? Can you see it now?
You might need to take down this one and then put the new one. So stop sharing and then reshare.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Now, are you seeing the actual presentation, like the slide?
We see
your
notes.
Ah, dang it.
That's
Let me
cool.
try that again. There, how's that? Can you see that now?
That's perfect.
That's better.
This is so confusing. Every time I do this, it's always on my other screen. So somehow it switched, but this actually works out better for me. So this is good. Okay, so everyone can see that. You can see this, I hope. I just switched slides. So before I launch into the specifics of grant writing, I really believe it's important for everyone to understand fundraising as a whole, and where grant funding fits into the overall picture. So this basically sums up what fundraising shouldn't be. Funders are not bank machines, they're people. And regardless of whether they're individual donors or they're staff members from a corporation or from a foundation or government, they're still people, and we need to remember that. So I want to ask, what is fundraising then? People are they have different ideas of what it is. And I really think it's quite simple. One of the first things it is it's about relationships. They're the underlying foundation of everything that a successful organization can do, not just in fund development and everything, right? When you're dealing with your participants or your clients, and when you're dealing with funders. There's a lot of organizations that do fundraising really, really well, but there's even more that don't do it well. And that's really, I believe, it comes down to that lack of understanding about building these mutually beneficial relationships. Everybody has a goal that they want to achieve, whether you're the funder or whether you're the organization seeking funds, you still have a goal. And what big part of this relationship that you need to look at is, how do you share your story? Some of you were talking about stories and how do you deal with the storytelling. And what you want to really do is inspire people, and stories are what you can do to inspire people. So whether you do that on the phone, whether you do that in a meeting, or whether you do that through a grant application, it really is about inspiring people. So that's really that's how I summarize fundraising. That's what it's about. And when you do that, eventually the money will start to come in. It's not going to happen the very next day likely, but it will start. So I'm not sure if any of you have seen this. It's called a donor pyramid. And basically what the donor pyramid is it's a roadmap of where your donors or funders might reside within a fundraising sense. And it's a path of where they may follow. So almost everybody will start at the occasional gift area, and then some will start moving up the pyramid, but fewer and fewer will reach the top. So at the bottom, we've got occasional gifts, and most are here. These are more like a kind of a consumer transaction versus a true connection to the organization. So, you know, things like events or raffles or chocolate sales, those kinds of things. Then you move up to the annual gifts side. And these are the things when you know, at Christmas time, especially, we get lots of mailings that we get in our mailbox asking us for donations. Those are called annual gifts when you give to something like that. People can give to those, businesses give to those, and usually it's once a year, or maybe someone will decide to become a monthly giver, so they'll give little gifts every month. And sometimes if you have, some of your organizations may have a membership base where you charge, you know, $5, $10, $20 annually to allow people to become a member of your organization. That fits in there as well. So where does grants fit? Well, that fits in the major gifts section usually. And a major gift differs for every organization. It usually depends upon the impact that a certain size gift will have within that organization. So for example, a university might classify a major gift as $50,000 or more, while a small, maybe an animal rescue group might classify $500 as a major gift. Because that $500 in that small organization is going to have a huge impact. Whereas $500 in a larger organization is probably not going to have that same kind of impact. So it's really up to the organization to determine what their major gift is. And then finally, up at the top is the planned gifts. And this is really a good way for donors to meet what their philanthropic goals are, while at the same time they're balancing you know, personal or family and tax considerations. They may look at, you know, doing a publicly listed security or a life insurance policy or annuities. They may leave to a charity. The most common planned gift is for sure a gift through someone's will, so a bequest where a person leaves a portion of their estate upon their death. So all types of donors can be part of this pyramid, including grant funders. And like I say, as you move up the pyramid, there's less people, and it becomes a more donor-centered relationship between the organization and that donor or funder. So there's lots of different types of donors. There's individuals, there's corporations, government, associations, churches, legions, foundations, service clubs, there's tons of them. And it's hard sometimes to think, well, where should I go? What can I do? And some of these are going to be dependent on charitable status for your organization. If you have charitable status, then your door is a little bigger than an organization that does not have that charitable status. So it makes things a little tougher, and it comes back to the whole, you know, the mention of partnerships and trying to build those partnerships. One thing I want you to know is, even if you don't have charitable status, you can always partner with an organization that does have the charitable status. And they can then be the kind of the holder of the money, so to speak, so that it can keep those doors open for you. So giving in Canada, some trends. Now these trends are definitely pre-COVID. There's not a lot of hard and fast stats that we have yet for the impact that COVID's had. We have some, you know, hearsay things, anecdotal, all of that. But, you know, just to give you a sense of where things usually would stand, these stats are definitely, sorry, I'm looking over at my screen over here, so it looks like I'm not looking at you. Excuse me. These stats are for charitable organizations because there's very little information and statistics on nonprofits, unfortunately. There's so many out there. In fact, it's very hard to even find out how many nonprofits exist. But from a charitable standpoint, it gives you at least some sense of where things are going. You'll see that government by far is the largest funder out there for Canada. And specifically the provincial level is where most of that funding comes from. The next largest one is individuals. Some people are surprised by that. A lot of people think corporations would be where things are at, but no, it's actually individuals. So if you can start building your individual giving portfolio, that would probably be a good thing. So donations tend to increase with age. As we get older, we want to make a greater difference, and we usually have some extra funds that we can do that with. Women historically will give more, slightly more than men do, or at the very least, they're kind of the behind the scenes motivation behind where those gifts go. People who volunteer tend to donate more, and that shouldn't be that surprising because, like I said earlier, relationships are what is really the foundation of any successful organization, and volunteers of course have a close relationship with those organizations that they're helping. And the top donors are the ones that contribute the most. They contribute around 83% of all total donations, so they are a big deal. The next up would be the foundations. Foundations give 6.7 billion annually, and it's usually through two streams, public versus a private foundation. Public foundations give the most, and those are organizations like Vancouver Foundation or Victoria Foundation. They're public, they have a board of directors that oversees them, and they're at arm's length, whereas the private tends to usually be a family-run foundation. They're definitely not at arm's length, and they make their decisions, you know, based on whatever's closest to them, to their hearts. And they usually don't have a lot of guidelines to go on. Geographically, you can see Ontario, of course, has almost 50% of all foundations out there. So BC is sitting at 9%. Corporations, they give a lot, not as much as a lot of people think, 4 billion annually, and they're usually quite clear on what they want to fund or what they want to support. Often it can be as a result of what their employees want to do as well, so they try to put all that together. The two streams within a corporation, the one stream is sponsorship, and the other is philanthropic. So sponsorship is more of a marketing-driven giving avenue for them. And it doesn't matter whether you have charitable status when it comes to sponsorship, they will usually fund any nonprofit. Whereas the philanthropic side, the charitable side, you need to have a charitable registration number to access those funds. So they're treated very differently on a corporation's expense lines. So one is a business expense sponsorship, which is why you can't give charitable receipts for a lot of events that happen. Whereas the philanthropic is an actual giving line. So unfortunately, this is too often the case for a lot of organizations. As Ben Franklin once said, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And this definitely applies to grant writing and fundraising for sure. So here we go. You know, what do we do when it comes to grant writing? Well, I can't say it enough. If you haven't done the planning, grant writing is going to suck. It really is, because you're basically, you know, throwing something at a wall and hoping it's going to stick. And you're hoping it's going to fit within the, you know, the parameters laid out by the funder and all of that. And that's really hard, and it's painful, and it's stressful. So I like to take the planning approach and just get rid of the stress. If you can plan out your program, so don't even think about the money, don't even think about the funders, just think about what you want to accomplish. And plan that out with as much detail and effort as you possibly can. And once you've got that plan, then you can start seeking out funders that align with your plan and what you're trying to accomplish. And once you do that, and you've got all of this written out, it's really copying, cutting and pasting into the applications as opposed to trying to come up with something brand new. So that's the first step for grant writing and preparing for it, is planning. The next one is research. A lot of you are keen to understand a little more about research, so I will get into that. And it's important to be really clear on why you need funding and who it's going to help. And when I say that, that doesn't mean, well, we need funding because our roof is leaking. And if without a roof, well, we can't deliver our programs. You know, yeah, that's important to you, for sure it is, but it's not going to be that important to the funder. They want to know, what does that roof mean? What does it mean for the community? Because if you guys can't deliver the programs, you know, that means 200 kids are not going to have an after school program. And they're going to be on the streets, or they're going to be stuck on their screens, or they're, you know, that's the impact that you're having on the community. And that's what you need to be able to share, not the fact that, you know, you've got a bucket underneath a leak. So the first step to preparing is essentially developing or creating your program or your project. Do you have a plan for it yet? If you don't, this is your first step, not looking for funders. You need to get this plan in place. So you want to think about the program in a lot of detail and really formulate what it's going to look like and why it's necessary. How are you going to evaluate it for success? And of course, you want to look at the financial part of it as well. Sorry, I talk with my hands and I don't know how I look. I can't see myself, so sorry. So I've got a simple worksheet which I'll make available after this is done. I kind of expanded the simple 2-page worksheet, but hopefully it'll help that it's a little longer. And I pulled out a few of the key questions to highlight in this workshop today. Because these are some of the key ones that you're likely going to find on almost all grant applications that you're going to be preparing for. So the first one, you know, what is your idea? And you know, you don't want just a 1-sentence idea. You want it to be robust. You want to really think through what are we trying to accomplish? Why are we trying to accomplish that? That's kind of in the next question, but what activities are we going to undertake? What's involved in all of this? And, you know, kind of be able to summarize that and really explain what you're trying to do. Then you're going to move on. And the project need is probably one of the most important questions, because funders want to know why it's needed. They don't know who you are, most likely. They don't know your community that you're coming from. They really know very little about you. So why is this even needed in the community? You know, you want to develop a youth program for 100 kids, but meanwhile, there's like only 30 kids in your community. Well, you know, that's not very helpful. So, you know, you need to be able to really describe what the impact is going to be at all different levels within your community and whatever you describe as your community. So I like to think of it kind of, you know, what will the impact be for your community if this program doesn't happen? That's kind of a backwards way of looking at it, but it might help you formulate and think through it a little bit more. And also the other key thing that you want to do to support your need is think about any research or statistics you might have available. You know, if you know that a particular program delivery model has been proven to work, you know, across the country or somewhere else, then state that, and really, this is a really good opportunity for you to state your case and really strengthen it by using these stats and any research that you're going to have. So what about goals, objectives, and outcomes? Those are the next 2 bullets. There's often confusion around what these are, and rightfully so. Goals tend to be more broad and general about what the program is going to accomplish. Objectives are a bit more specific, and often there's a time frame involved in them. While outcomes are detailed, measurable statements that outline what the end result is going to be for the participant. So I'll give you an example of all of that. So for a goal, let's say your goal is to reduce anxiety among youth, and that's a big one now with COVID. Your objective might be to create and deliver a group program to help 20 youth learn 3 strategies for managing anxiety over a 6-month period. And your outcome for that is participants will recognize their anxiety triggers when confronting a new situation. They will apply relevant tools they learn to manage this new situation. So I hope that kind of gives some understanding of how that works. And you can always Google it too, just to get additional clarity on what that all means. But outcomes are becoming more and more popular questions on applications, because funders want to know that you've thought this through and you really do want something to happen with their money. And then you want to be able to evaluate all the ideas and all the success that you're going to have. So how are you going to do that? Maybe you're going to use participant surveys or interviews. And depending on how you structure your budget, maybe you've worked in a budget line for a formal evaluation to be done by an outside consultant. Whatever that is, just make sure that you know how it's going to work and you can explain it in your application. Sustainability is another thing funders want to know, because they don't want to give you money and know that once that money runs out, the program's done. Like in essence, they want to see that it's going to keep going. Maybe there's a legacy to it, right? Like it's just going to keep going and going and going. So you want to be able to say what's going to happen once that money is gone. Who are you going to be approaching? What plan do you have? Maybe you have some earned revenue plan that you're wanting to do. You're going to charge registration fees or something, but just to get the program started, you don't want to do registration fees right now, and that's totally fine. And budgeting, what sources of funding do you have? What are the costs run this program? Funders never want to be the only source of revenue for a program. So you need to be thinking about other funding opportunities, whether it's additional grant funders or whether it's through registration fees. Maybe you have a line of credit with a bank that you can use and it's guaranteed. Whatever it is, make sure that you've got some other sources of revenue. And I would say, as a general rule, funders are not going to want to fund more than 50%. There are some that will, but most won't. Always ensure that your expenses and your revenues are going to zero out, so you don't want any surplus or deficits. And always show the true cost of how much this program or project is going to be. Often, we only show a little narrow focus of what the program costs are. We don't think about, well, you know what, the executive director is going to be spending 5% of her time on this, so include that. Or you've got 20 volunteers that are going to be putting 10 hours in per person. Include that, because if you didn't have those volunteers, then you'd need to get paid staff probably. So make sure you're including that. And there are some parameters around how much you can charge for volunteer time. It depends on whether it's kind of a professional type in-kind contribution, so say a lawyer or something like that, or versus a dog walker or something like that. And that's just something you can Google and get a sense of how much it works within your community. Some communities are a bit different on how much they will do. So measure all of those things and include them so that there's a true picture. So instead of a $20,000 budget, the true budget might actually be $75,000, $80,000. Make sure that that's there. And how are you covering that? Like if the executive director's staff time is already covered, that's okay. Then you can reflect that in the revenue side of your budget, that your organization is contributing this amount of money. So that kind of sums up the budgeting. So basically, if you can dedicate a number of hours to these questions and the questions in the worksheet and really come up with that robust plan. And if you do that, you're almost guaranteed that you're going to be able to align one way or another with the funders that you identify, and you're going to be able to just take these bits and copy them and paste them into an application. Of course, you're going to have to do some wordsmithing because you want to make sure that you're communicating to them with the right language, which is something Stacey's going to talk to you about later. But just make sure that you've got some answers to these things. Research, my favorite part. I love researching funders. I'm even getting goosebumps now. I'm just kidding, I'm not that geeky, but I do like it. So where do you look for funding? A lot of you are going to have your kind of your go-to funders, and that's awesome. So treat them well, continue to treat them well, and develop that relationship. But we always need to find some new funding for sure. Google doesn't quite cut it. It is a resource, but it doesn't quite cut it. So there's different places that you can look to find funders that align with what you're trying to accomplish. Foundation Search and Big Database is operated by a company called Metasoft. And I find that one to be quite user-friendly, but it's quite costly. It's a few $1,000s probably a year. So, you know, there's opportunity to partner with other organizations, maybe split the cost if that's something that's important to you. So there are ways around that. Grant Connect is another resource, and that's operated by Imagine Canada. They're about $100 a month, I think, still. But on the good news front, if your organization is a member of Volunteer Victoria, then you have free access to that. It has to be in-person access, but you just give them a ring or email them and say the name of your organization and say we're members and we'd like to access the Grant Connect database. And you set up a time, a block of time, usually 2 hours, but you can do more. You head on downtown to their office, they set you up in a workstation and off you go. So there's always that one. Grant Station is another, it's a resource. It's economical for sure if you can get it through TechSoup. For those of you that don't know what TechSoup is, it's it's a site you can go to, and they have different softwares and stuff, resources like this, Grant Station, at a fraction of the cost of what it would be for you to purchase it direct from the vendors. So TechSoup, for example, had Grant Station. They had a deal going on just a few days ago. It's ended now, but it was $107 for the year compared to their normal price of $269 for the year. So there's that one. Charity Village is a totally free site. They are, I don't find them that user-friendly, but they do have a list of potential funders. A lot of them are common ones, but it is a decent place to go and may trigger some inspiration on other places to look, other funders. And then Grant Advance is another one. I've not used Grant Advance. I think Stacy has, but it's you can get it for as low as $89 a month, depending on the subscription term. And most of these, aside from Charity Village, will allow you to put in your search parameters, so you can really drill down as far as you want to the point where, you know, you get 10 funders only that you can look at. But at least you know that they align well with your geographic area, with whatever your target audience is, stakeholder groups, all of that. So it's worth it to use one of these for sure. But beyond a doubt, the most reliable thing that you can do is reach out to the funders. But before you do that, just make sure you've gone to their website and you've dug a little bit deeper just to make sure that they do, you know, at least on the surface, it looks like they align well with what you're trying to do. But reach out to them, because there's a fear that funders are, you know, they're sitting high up on a perch somewhere and looking down at us, and they're not. They want to help. They want you to be successful. Everybody wins when you guys are successful. So call them if there's a phone number. Some don't want you to phone, and you need to respect that, of course. But I usually will email and just ask if there's an opportunity to set up a time to talk, have some really thoughtful questions that you can ask them. But make sure, like I said, make sure you've done your initial research. There's nothing worse than, you know, asking them questions that are readily available on their website, because that's wasting everybody's time. So make sure you do that. And another resource, so once you've looked at all of these, you know, you've come up with your prospect list, maybe you've got 20 potential funders, start digging deep. Like I say, go to their websites, but you can also go for foundations, go to the Canada Revenue Agency website, and there's a charity list that you can access, because the foundations they're considered charities, so they need to fill out their charity returns. And on there, it'll disclose things like their financial position, their list of board of directors, and also a list of what organizations they gave funding to. So that will help you, you know, make sure that the geographic area does match. If, you know, they've never given in BC, then they probably won't. So why waste your time with them? So that's always another good resource. Just gonna have some water.
Mel, we're probably nearing that 5-minute mark, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, totally. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. So finally, you've done all your research. You've done your preparation. You're ready to start filling out some applications. Some funders, before you can fill out the application, they're going to want you to do what's called a letter of inquiry. Usually it's a 2-page letter that you write, and it provides the funder with a snapshot of your organization and the program that you're seeking funds for. And if they like what they see, then they're going to ask you to submit a formal application. Most applications and even letters of inquiry are online now. So that means you don't have a lot of flexibility in the amount of text that you can give them. So storytelling can be tough. So if you just can, you know, get some little quotes that you can implement and add into your responses about impact, then that would be great, but you're probably not going to be able to put a lot in there. So there's that, and let me just check my notes. Usually what I do is I prepare a Word document with all my responses, and then that way I can then just copy and paste my responses into the applications. Then I know the word or character count that I'm dealing with, and it's a lot easier to do the edits that way. If you need to include anything to support the document or support your submission, make sure you get all that in advance, whether it's your organization's financial statements. Often they want audited, letters of support, or, you know, maybe a letter from a client or participant and how it's changed their life, or, you know, proof of your organization society registration. Just have them all ready so that you can upload them quickly, because there are some applications, BC Gaming being one, that will not allow you to save your application as you're working through it. So you have to decide, you know what, I'm going to spend this hour or two today and I'm doing this application from start to finish. Just make sure you've got it all ready. And finally, don't miss the deadline, because funders don't accept late applications, unless of course you've arranged something in advance, but otherwise forget it, and always allow some extra time, a day or two at least, for that deadline in case you run into technical issues. So you're successful. You've done all this work, all this research, and you got the money, or you got a letter to say you're going to get the money, and you're going, crap, now what do I do? Yeah, you have some steps to take. The first thing is you need to thank them immediately. If you can call them, that would be great, because that'll just, is that me or no? Is that like a stop thing? I hope not.
I don't know who that is, but probably
okay.
It sounds like you're getting towards the end, so I think that's fine.
Okay, good.
Timer that is though.
Okay, good. I thought, uh-oh, that's the gentle way of saying shut up. So yeah, call them if you can and say thanks so much. This was great news. They like to hear your happy voice, so do that. Best practice is to send your thank you letter within your formal thank you letter within 24 to 48 hours. But if that can't happen, you know, maybe you need to get a board signature or something, and it's just not going to happen, then an immediate email thank you or the phone call to acknowledge that you got this notice, and let them know that you're going to follow up with a formal letter as soon as you can. Go through all the reporting requirements, because often for larger funders, they have a lot of requirements. And make sure that you let any team members that need to be part of those requirements in your organization, make sure they know that so that they can also put those reminders into their calendar. You know, for example, finance, they need to track the money and make sure it's going into the right place, because they're going to have to report on it. And the same with the program staff. They need to be able to keep track. Maybe they need to, you know, track qualitative or quantitative measures, and get your evaluation process going. Follow through on any recognition promises that you've made. That's often a question as well. How are you going to recognize this funder? Be aware that if it's charitable, you really can't put their logo up anywhere. So be careful about logo offers. So make sure, you know, whether it's social media posts or newsletter stories, whatever it is, put those in your calendar, organize it so that you don't miss on those. And of course, deliver the program or the project. That's what the money's for. And then follow through on any evaluation that you promised you were going to do. And that's it. So I think I wrapped up in the amount of time I needed to. I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything, but you probably just want to move on to the next bit and then maybe do questions at the end.
I think if you're okay with it, we might actually separate it just so that people can remember from your content, do a few questions, and then we'll shift to Stacy. So first off, thank you, Mel. That was really fantastic. Great overview. You can take complexity and teach it in a way that's a little more simple. So I appreciate that. Just want to open the floor to see if anyone here has any questions.
I think, Brian, I think you're talking, but your mic is off.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you, Mel. That was great. Is there any way to get a copy of your slides? Because I can't write that fast. I didn't
Of course.
notes.
Yes, I can definitely send the slide deck copy. Yes.
Thank you.
Of course.
Anyone else? I have a question if others don't. You were mentioning around how it's helpful if charities support non-for-profits in supporting with whether that's them on the grant or supporting them receiving funding. Is there any advice you have to charities to be able to start offering that support to non-for-profits? Because OneAbility is a mix. So that might be a really great place for us to look at if there are some that have charitable status and some that don't, how we can actually support in that fundraising. Do we always need to do the project together? Is there any risks from a CRA regulation point of view?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So it's always hard, right? Because there's such limited funding that everybody has. So for charities to just kind of offer that as, you know, offer their management services almost is, if it doesn't fit within their mandate or their mission, then they're running the risk of, you know, doing things incorrectly. So as a general rule, they need to be part of that partnership and the delivery of the program some way, somehow. So yeah, that would be my advice for sure. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other ways. I'll keep thinking though.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I have a quick question, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this or how I'm gonna articulate it. But first, I just want to say thank you for your enthusiasm. Oh, it's just like contagious. You can tell how excited you are about this. So thank you for that. Yeah, okay. So sometimes when I've seen some grant applications, some of the language that they use is quite old school, I'll say. And I'm just wondering maybe they don't really fit in that like diversity, equity, inclusion lens that a lot of us are coming from. Have you ever been able to give feedback to a funder around how they're asking it? Are we allowed to do that? Is that inappropriate? Obviously, we want to like do what they need in order because we want the money, but we want to make sure we're also, moving that movement forward. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And now when you're first starting, I always say when you're beginning your relationship with anyone, it doesn't matter whether it's a funder, significant other, whatever, just think about what is appropriate to say at the beginning of any relationship, right? So you don't want to say, wow, this is a great question, but you should really be doing this and saying it this way, right? Like, you know, they're probably not going to think, wow, we want to fund you. So that's just my take, right? Just relationship building 101. That said, if you are establishing a relationship, and this is why I wanted to say it's a two-way relationship, right? So if you establish a really positive relationship with a funder where you've talked to them on the phone and, you're really comfortable with them, I think it's definitely valuable for you to say, you know what, I'm not sure if you guys have ever thought about the questions that you asked and the different way that you're wording them, but I'd be thrilled to offer you any feedback so that, it's a little more inclusive for everyone that's seeking your support. There's always a way to say that. And I think they'll appreciate that, especially if you've already established a relationship with them. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Not off the get-go.
Well, yeah, no. It's kind of saying, wow, I really think you're great. Do you ever think of changing your hair? Right? So, anyway.
Thank you. Any other questions from everybody before we move on to Stacy?
I saw a question from Paul in the chat box, Karina.
Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you. So Paul is asking, how do you suggest we balance the story without seeming like we're exploiting our community? That is a fantastic question, Paul. I think many of us
is.
That.
It is, Paul. And that is definitely a challenge. I used to work with a women's shelter, and there was amazing stories that could be told, but you can never attach a name to them. And that was for safety reasons. And obviously, same with kids or youth. So if you can put a face and a name to a story, that's the ideal, because it just shows it truly is real. It's not fictitious. But in those instances, funders know that there's instances where that just can't be done. But if there's some way to at least say the story in a way that is not going to give an identity to anybody, and it's okay to change the story slightly, right? Like, you don't have to, say so-and-so goes to, Rogers Elementary School. You don't need to say the name of the elementary school. You can take that out and make it a bit more generic. But storytelling, like, the biggest challenge with grant funding and storytelling is that a lot of them are online applications now, and you just don't have a lot of room for storytelling. And that's an unfortunate thing. I always think the funders that you can identify where they have no online application and you can actually put a full proposal out, incorporate storytelling for sure, whether it's through letters or, a client writes a letter of support for the organization, and telling their own story is always powerful. It's in their own words and it has their name attached to it. Excuse me. That said, if you can't, there's nothing wrong with you doing the letter and putting anonymous or something like that. So I don't know, Paul, if that helps. I know you might still feel like you're exploiting it, but you're really not exploiting it. You're really painting a picture of why your organization is needed. Like, these are the faces, these are the people that you're helping. I don't look at that and say that's being exploitive. I look and say that's being raw and honest and real, right? So, and funders will see that too.
Mm-hmm. And I think something that we've learned too is, involve your participants when you can in asking that and saying, even to Carolyn's point, help us change that narrative, so how would you like your story shared? And how do you want to be a part of this? And seeing if we can carve that together, versus just following the parameters maybe that are given, see if there's a bit of a conversation to explore.
Agreed.
Thank you, Mel. That was fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks,
Stacey,
everyone.
the space is yours.
Okay, thanks, Mel. That was great. Lots of really helpful information and great questions by everyone. So I'm just going to share my screen, and I have kind of two phases to my presentation. I'm going to give you some of my top tips, which I'm going to go through pretty quick because Mel has also covered some of those. And then I'm going to get into some specific examples of writing and sharing some successes that we've had with specific grants. So here we go. And I just need to figure out how to put it on slideshow here. Great. So as Karina mentioned in the beginning, I'm the business development manager at Pisces, and I help with fund development. And a large part of what I do is grant writing. And I started with no experience and have grown to be able to really, I guess, grow in this area and have some success. Can everyone see the screen? Yeah, okay. I just have something strange on mine here.
There is a yellow mark
Yeah.
on everybody's as well. I don't know how to get, is that on your computer? Oh, it's fading.
It's fading. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm gonna get into the top 10 tips here. Oh, it's back.
Yeah, it came back.
Okay, I'm gonna stop share and go back in.
Okay.
Sorry about that, everyone. It's just distracting, so.
No problem.
Okay, here we go. So number one, know who is funding your organization and be aware of the range of grants. Mel got into this in terms of the research that needs to be done. And I'll just share with you, we had an experience in our early days of applying to the TELUS Community Foundation. And one way, this was a big learning lesson for me, is that we ended up meeting with one of the board members who our organization had a relationship with. And he really helped push our application through and gave us some advice. And he really got to know our project, and we were successful. And that was for, I think, for $20,000 in that range. And that was a big for us. So if you can find particularly board members who are on the foundation or have a relationship with the organization, that is really helpful. Another good source of funds for us has been looking at our own corporate vendor list, looking at companies that we spend money on, you know, for office supplies, banking. We have a sponsorship relationship with both Monk Office and Island Savings, and they've been partners of ours for years and really help share our message in the community and help support us in different ways. And then Mel had mentioned grant research tools, which we just purchased our first grant research, Grant Advance, which I absolutely loved the presentation that the company did. Unfortunately, we bought it in November and I haven't had a chance to look at it, but we may be able to help OneAbility, some of your organizations. Maybe we can help use this tool together. So we'll keep that in mind. So one thing I like to do when you're looking through the requirements of a grant or suggestions is start the letters of support really early. I find this a bit of a process and it's easy to procrastinate, but it's really good to give your the person writing the letter good notice for this. So start the process early. I also always actually write the letter on their behalf in quite a basic form, but that really helps them. It's a lot of work to write letters, and so I provide a template. Make sure they're a person of influence, and that can be even someone in, you know, a family or child that you've helped. It could be, we've had Richard Stanwyck write us letters of support. He's from Island Health. We hear him a lot right now with COVID. Always give them plenty of time. I try to give them a month. Sometimes it's not possible, but that's why I say start early. Make sure you have a relationship with the person you're asking, or that your organization has a relationship. It's hard to ask someone to do this just out of the blue if they don't know anything about you. And then I just wanted to share you a sample. What I like to do kind of on a yearly basis is we'll get through our physical literacy department, we'll have our you know, families that we've really connected with, we'll ask them to write us a letter of support or a testimonial. And then we'll ask them if we can use this for grant letters. So I just wanted to show you a quick sample of a parent letter of support. So here we go. I've taken out some of the specifics for privacy reasons. So I'm just going to give you a moment to read this.
Oh, that's great, Stacy.
So I'll let you continue reading, but one thing that I've done at the end is you can kind of tailor it just with a short sentence to speak to the grant that you're applying for. So here we are in full support of Pisces' proposal to provide accessibility enhancements to the facility, as we know it will benefit many families in the years to come. So you can see the stories can be the same for every grant, and then you can just tailor the letter at the bottom to the specific grant. And of course, we always ask for their consent. So I just wanted to share that sample with you. And then that way you have them ready to go for grants that come up through the year. Okay, back into share. Mel went into this. You really need to differentiate your organization. She talked about the challenges with storytelling in space, but you really need to kind of win the hearts of the organization. Also eliminate industry jargon and acronyms. We speak in a lot of acronyms at Pisces. Pisces is an acronym, and really important to not be giving all those acronyms out. Always ask someone to review the application. I always like to check the instructions for the grant one more time before I submit it. Not at the last minute, but a few days before, just take one more look through some of those, whether it's budgeting requirements, because I often find little things that can really make a difference. Again, aim to get your application in early. I just think it really reflects well. It's like when you show up for a job interview early, you're not waiting till the 9th hour to submit something. And it does happen. I've submitted things at the 9th hour, but there's also, sad stories of organizations that miss that deadline because of technical difficulties, and there's nothing you can do. And then just in the follow-up, I always try to be overly polite in, of course, a genuine way, and not to show signs of entitlement. I think, it can be frustrating when you receive funding and then sometimes your funding is stopped and you don't really have any good reason why, but there's lots of great organizations out there that were probably, maybe, possibly more deserving or had a stronger application. So it can be hard to take sometimes not receiving the funding, but just always be polite and courteous and show your gratitude. Just as an example, we have some funding with gaming, which is through the government, and you hear that they're not always as easy to deal with, but they've always been very pleasant for me to deal with, and I always am very courteous and polite in the emails that I correspond with them. So I just find that a helpful tip. So I hope I'm not moving along too quick, but I am conscious of time. So I just wanted to get into some specific examples of some applications that I've written. So the first one, and I haven't shared the names of the organizations, we're going to call Fund a Lot for Kids is the organization. And the opportunity is funding for programs with children with a disability. And the grant range is in the $18,000. So the challenge for us, this was a few years ago, is that we have many adapted children's programs, and each program does not amount to thousands of dollars. It might just cost us $2,000 to run a program, or $500. You always have to consider overhead as well, so it really is often more that it costs. We have a big facility, we have to keep the electricity going, we have lots of staff, we have accounting department, marketing. So what we did is we have, as I said, many different programs. Our solution was to bundle the programs into one program. So it's kind of taking on a bit of a marketing stance here, and so that the value of the program is higher and the impact and reach is larger. So I've just listed the different programs that we had. And so we said, well, for this application, let's call them All Can Play and make it one program. It can be a program that takes place several nights of the week, and it just has slightly different demographics. So PICE All Can Play programs provide participants with quality physical literacy enriched programs that welcome people of all abilities. This is a very broad statement, but it's concise and says what we're doing. And then I apologize for all the text here, but I did want to show you specific examples. And as Mel had said with the need, you really want to show the need for the community, not for your organization. And here we've used some stats from Participaction. They had some really great stats in their 2018 report with some quotes. And then just in the bold area, PICE overcomes these barriers that Participaction talks about with an accessible facility, adapted equipment, and highly trained and experienced staff. And just that these programs cannot run without the support of our community, such as this foundation we've applied to, as the families who participate often have limited resources. So you will receive this. I'm not going to go through reading it. I'll let you take a look later. Here's also an example of an objective. So the objective of the program is to provide children and youth with quality physical literacy programs. I'll let you finish reading that. And the program welcomes 60+ children with various disabilities from 4 to 18, with a ratio of 70% male, 30% female. And that would have been specifically asked from the grant. So just before I go on, we were successful in getting that grant for a number of years, and we don't receive the funding anymore. I guess our most recent application was not successful, but we will apply again, and we'll try to meet the needs, and also make sure that we have the programming that is really needed in the community. We've been able to find other sources of funding as well. Okay, moving along here. So another grant story is an accessibility capital grant. We had, this is an interesting story because I felt like this was the grant I worked really, really hard on and had a very good feeling that this would be successful. But unfortunately, it ended up being rejected, and I was quite devastated, but decided to, suck it up and move on. And lo and behold, about a month later, we got a phone call from this government office saying that they actually would like to consider our application. They were impressed with the application, and they would like to offer us $475,000 towards the project. So we were just blown away by this. Now, it didn't come that easily because we had to provide more rationale as to why this project was accessible. So I'm just going to show you, I was able to get some assistance from the Rick Hansen Foundation because our board chair had a very, he used to work for Rick Hansen Foundation and had some great contacts there. So here we go. Here is the before statement that I used. Enhance the ability for persons with mobility limitations to enter the building from the front entrance. So I'll just give you a moment to read that. Okay, so that's what we put in the grant. And then after getting some help from Rick Hansen Foundation, the statement became resurface the cobblestone front entry plaza with an accessible rubber sport surface. So you can see that's just much more clear, says exactly what we're doing, and is making it accessible. And then I'll just, again, give you a moment to read through, particularly the underlined areas is where the language has really been enhanced to support this.
It's almost like you sandwiched a little bit of how you were framing this opportunity with what it is, what the needs are, why you need it, and then what the end result will look like.
That's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
And you'll also notice we get into more universal design. So not just persons with mobility disabilities, but you can see the visual and in some instances hearing. And that's one thing that Rick Hansen Foundation really opened my eyes to was, persons that are elderly. There's just such a broad range, and you really want it to be universal, the improvements that you're making. So this is actually the front entrance now, and you can see the black surface is all resurfaced with a sport court. And these are some of our camp youth last summer using sled hockey for a camp activity. So it's done. As part of this grant as well, we wanted to put more accessible push buttons around the facility. So number 2, make entrance to classrooms, multi-purpose rooms, and washrooms accessible. I basically want to say that they're not accessible. The doors don't open without a push button. And then after, number 2, power-assisted door openers for classrooms, washrooms, and movement studio. And then we use some newer rectangular extended door controls that are a little bit more up to date and easier for people to use. And then just some more enhanced language, specific. And then this is the final piece, but probably the most challenging part we had to make and the most valuable part of the project was to get rid of our old bleachers in the gymnasium, which were very uncomfortable for people to sit in and very difficult and not very safe for people to set up. So we, this is an area that Rick Hansen Foundation really helped with. So the statement here before was enhanced seating area in multi-sport court, which is our gymnasium for persons with disabilities. And that basically the current seating is not accessible. So I'm just going to go down here. The new statement is renovate and enhance the seating in the gymnasium for accessibility. And removal of the current bleachers and addition of new universally accessible seating that includes the following accessibility features. And again, I'll just give you a moment to read through this. So you can say we really got into specifics here. Companion seating, natural interaction and socializing, backrests, persons with limited strength. And then I'll move along here, but wider depths for more leg room, ease of movement between the seats. My daughter's here and she's not feeling well, so her head's popped up over my laptop. Little distraction, sorry about that.
It's all good, Stacy.
So again, we were able to get the funding actually for the whole project, and this is our new accessible seating. So I thought it's always nice to have a visual to show everyone, and it comes out with the push of a button, so the volunteers and staff are not in any danger of injuring themselves. The seats at the very front row, they fold up so that wheelchair companions can sit in a seat and the wheelchairs can be there. We've got yellow nosing on the stairs for visual contrast. So I hope that you were able to take some tips. I apologize for kind of rushing through and having so much text, but I really wanted to be able to share just how much language can really help. Using nice language and enhancing the language can really help a grant. And I was really able to do that through getting advice through the Rick Hansen Foundation. And I certainly would be happy to look over if you ever wanted me to review any of your applications to assist as well. because we're all in this together, doing good for our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Stacy. That was fantastic. I loved your concrete examples. I think that I'm not alone probably in, we can really see how it goes from the stage of grant writing, fundraising to the, the point where you actually get to see the product. And I haven't seen the seats since it's happened. So even to get a picture of that was really, really phenomenal. There was a question about your top tips. And if you don't mind, maybe while we just gather some questions for you right now, if you don't mind copying and pasting just those top 10 into the chat. A few folks missed the last
Sorry
bit.
about that.
And then on that hand, it looks like Jade has raised her hand.
Yeah, thanks, Stacy. It's pretty cool too. I know with Sportability, we had our bocce Canadian Championships at Pisces. So we saw, I don't think all the accessibility, I don't think the whole project was complete yet, but it was definitely, we had all the doors and the buttons and bathrooms. So everyone was really happy with that. It made our event successful. So that was great. One of the questions I want to throw out, and I'll try and articulate it too. Like Carol, I'm trying to kind of get my thoughts together as well. But I think many people on this call can relate to it too, as a smaller nonprofit organization that's working to service the province. We're a small group, and we wear multiple hats. And so I think with Pisces, it's great that you have your role and can really help the organization with succeeding with that, with their goals, with funding and things like that. So I think kind of what I'm trying to get at here is when you're writing these grants and having these goals, what's kind of the approach you take with your team at Pisces? Because I know you guys have different departments. Is it, are you directly meeting with those that are the ones that are on the ground working in the programs and things like that?
Definitely, I work really closely with Chris Wright on our physical literacy team, who many of you know, and he definitely helps write the grants, and he might go in first and put the information in, and then I'll just kind of touch it up. But definitely work very closely with the staff. On the capital grants, I work probably a little bit more closely with our facility manager and CEO. But it is a group process, and getting grants is a lot of work. It's great to get them, but once you have them, you really have to deliver. And so it's really important for me to have the buy-in and support from our staff, because they're actually going to be the ones delivering. It's not me. Mm-hmm. And so I really want to make sure that that relationship is positive, and that they embrace the opportunity as well. I don't want it to be a burden. And some grants have been burdens. They've just been headaches to administer because they require so much detail and reporting, and they're very black and white. So we actually find now that sometimes the larger grant amounts are much easier to report on. It's sometimes those ones that are for $2,500 or $5,000, and you have to collect all the receipts, and can be more difficult. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, definitely, because where my mind's going is, thinking about definitely having someone, that's more familiar and focused in that area, would help us and take some pressures off of those that do wear multiple hats. And so I'm just kind of thinking of, potential other internships, but how you keep them on the same page of, this is what our goals are, and making sure they're involved in that process. So, thank you.
Okay. I should say too, I started out as executive assistant. So I just started taking on some grant writing, and then we found it could be quite successful. And really make sure you write in those overhead costs into the grant, because like I said, there's people from marketing helping with the grant, there's accounting has to track it all, and that takes time. So the grants you're probably writing are more valuable than you think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. If there's any remainder questions that are burning, feel free to raise your hand. And otherwise, what we'll do is you can always gather those questions and bring them forward, send them over to the OneAbility email, and we can ask them directly to Stacy and Mel, and then get back to you all on those answers. Kimberly.
You just made me think with that last question, when you're looking at including all of those administration or overhead costs, what's the running total now? I know it used to be a percentage, you couldn't have more than.
It depends. I mean, you do have to look at what the grant is asking because they do have different conditions, but as a rule of thumb, I would say if it's a direct programming grant, we would build in 30% margin. So if we're paying our staff, say, $18 or $20 an hour, we would add 30% onto that to help cover some of those extra costs. And then there might be a line item to do marketing, and you could put 1,000 or 2,000 in for marketing. Because, you know, with programming, sometimes there's planning time that goes into it. There's meetings with supervisors, that sort of thing.
Okay.
At Power to Be, we try and do the same. We try and do about 60% stays within that program realm, 20-ish stays within that operations, and 10 would fall under admin.
Okay, great. I'm just trying to paste these things in.
Yeah. Is there any other questions? Okay. Well, we just want to give a big thanks to Kimberly and Stacy again, and all of you for spending time with us on your Friday. Thank you so much. Please do give us some feedback on how you felt this worked. Do you like these types of sessions? I definitely felt it was valuable. And it's also great to see everybody from across BC and representing BC and Ontario. So yeah, thank you for today, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good to see you. Take care.
Bye.